Pearl Seidenstricker was born into a family of ghosts. She was the fifth of 7 children, and when she looked back afterward at her beginnings, she remembered a crowd of brothers and sisters at home, tagging after their mother, listening to her sing, and begging her to tell stories. We looked out over the paddy fields and the thatched roofs of the farmers in the valley, and in the distance a slender pagoda seemed to hang against the bamboo on a hillside, Pearl wrote, describing a storytelling session on the veranda of the family house above the Yangtze River. But we saw none of these. What they saw was America, a strange, dreamlike, alien homeland where they had never set foot. The siblings who surrounded Pearl in these early memories were dreamlike as well. Her older sisters, Maud and Edith, and her brother Arthur, had all died young in the course of 6 years from dysentery, cholera, or malaria. Edgar, the eldest, 10 years of age when Pearl was born, stayed just long enough to teach her to walk, but a year or 2 later he was gone too. Sent back to be educated in the United States, he would be a young man of 20 before his sister saw him again. He left behind a new baby brother to take his place, and when she needed company of her own age, Pearl peopled the house with her dead siblings. These 3, who came before I was born and went away too soon, somehow seemed alive to me, she said. Every Chinese family had its own quarrelsome, mischievous ghosts, who could be appealed to, appeased, or comforted with paper people, houses, and toys. As a small child lying awake in bed at night, Pearl grew up listening to the cries of women on the street outside, calling back the spirits of their dead or dying babies. In some ways she herself was more Chinese than American. I spoke Chinese first and more easily, she said. If America was for dreaming about, the world in which I lived was Asia. I didn't consider myself a white person in those days. Her friends called her Shensho, Chinese for Pearl, and treated her as one of themselves. She slipped in and out of their houses, listening to their mothers and aunts talk so frankly and in such detail about their problems that Pearl sometimes felt it was her missionary parents, not herself, who needed protecting from the realities of death, sex, and violence. She was an enthusiastic participant in local funerals on the hill outside the walled compound of her parents' house. Large, noisy, convivial affairs where everyone had a good time. Pearl joined in as soon as the party got going, with people killing cocks, burning paper money, and gossiping about foreigners making malaria pills out of babies' eyes. "Everything you say is lies," I remarked pleasantly. There was always a moment of stunned silence. Did they, or did they not, understand what I'd said? They asked each other. They understood, but could not believe they had. The unexpected apparition of a small American girl squatting in the grass and talking intelligibly, unlike other Westerners, seemed magical, if not demonic. Once an old woman shrieked aloud, convinced she was about to die, now that she could understand the language of foreign devils. Pearl made the most of the effect she produced and of the endless questions about her clothes, her colouring, her parents, the way they lived and the food they ate, that followed as soon as the mourners got over their shock. She said she first realised there was something wrong with her at New Year 1897, when she was 4.5 years old, with blue eyes and thick yellow hair that had grown too long to fit inside a new red cap trimmed with gold Buddhas. "Why must we hide it?" she asked her Chinese nurse, who explained that black was the only normal colour for hair and eyes. "It doesn't look human, this hair." Pearl escaped through the back gate to run free on the grasslands thickly dotted with tall pointed graves behind the house. She and her companions, real or imaginary, climbed up and down the grave mounds and flew paper kites from the top. Here in the green shadows we played jungles one day and housekeeping the next. She was baffled by a newly arrived American, one of her parents' visitors, who complained that the Seidenstrickers lived in a graveyard. "That huge empire is one mighty cemetery," Mark Twain wrote of China, "ridged and wrinkled from its centre to its circumference with graves." Ancestors and their coffins were part of the landscape of Pearl's childhood. The big, heavy wooden coffins that stood ready for their occupants in her friends' houses, or lay waiting burial for weeks or months in the fields and along the canal banks, were a source of pride and satisfaction to farmers whose families had for centuries poured their sweat, their waste, and their dead bodies back into the same patch of soil.